Today we are looking at the golf swing of recent Quicken Loans National 2017 winner Kyle Stanley. Now Kyle is currently, in 2017, 6th on tour in strokes gained off the tee, 3rd in strokes gained approach to the green, and he's actually 2nd overall in greens and regulation percentage. So to help explain Kyle's statistical dominance, we're going to focus on 3 key fundamentals in his swing that will give us some insight into why he is such a consistent ball striker. Specifically, we're going to look at the way in which he initiates his transition into his downswing, and then we'll look at the way he sets the club face during his downswing, and then lastly we'll have a look at how he delivers the club face through the impact zone. So to get things started here, I've moved both swings right to the point where Kyle's about to initiate the transition, and I've drawn a couple lines here that we're going to use to help illustrate a couple of micro moves that would be otherwise hard to spot but are pretty telling. So as he starts his transition on the right, we're going to look at that lower line, and the first thing we'll notice is that just for that split second the transition, we see the gap between his knees widening, and specifically his left knee has moved off the line while his right one is still pretty much stationary, maybe a tiny bit of movement. And on our other line, if we look at that pants belt loop, as that same transition is happening, we see, if anything, a subtle dropping of that hip as he creates some rotation. So what this is telling us is that Kyle Stanley is not making his first move in transition a concerted effort to push off his right side. If it were, we would see both knees move together. We might even see that right knee get closer to that left knee right off the bat. Additionally, if he were pushing off the right side but trying to keep his head still, we would see that right pelvis drop and that left one start to rise. And we're not seeing that either. So that can't be what he's doing. What we are seeing is a pulling action from his left side. So his pelvis and his torso are actually initiating a little bit of rotation and getting that started before the push from the right side. So if you look over here on the left, we're going to see that left side right there trying to move a little bit. And what this does is, once you get that left side going and clearing, now when you push with the right side, you're going to get an action that actually propels the rotation. So you get a little bit of dual rotation in the hips. See that in a lot of great players. And as we'll see more clearly in a few minutes, unhindered body rotation through the impact area is a critical fundamental for Kyle's success as a ball striker. So now that we see how Kyle is initiating that transition, once he gets that downswing going, let's take a look at what happens to his club face. So at the top he's got pretty standard club face, flat wrist. As he comes down, he's rotating out of the way, he's going to do 2 things. He's driving that right elbow in front of his body, and at the same time he is, as we're going to see, starting to bow that lead wrist. Maybe not that much, but it's there. Supinate that forearm, elbows toward the target, and that club face, and I'm sorry again about how blurry it is, but we can see setting that club face in a position that some people would call a little bit shut. I'm going to use the term like I like to. I'm going to call it less open and closer to square, so there's less work to do approaching impact. On the right here, you can see it's hard to tell, but he's bowing that wrist, and that logo of his glove is kind of pointing right towards our camera here. And if we look at this down the line view of a driver swing from Kyle, we're going to see these moves even a little more pronounced, so that clearing that left side before the thrust or push from the right side. The setting of that lead wrist, it's a terrible drawing, but you can tell what I mean. Club face less open in position as he approaches impact. And now we're ready to look at our final point of focus, which is the delivery of the club through impact. And we're going to answer why Kyle would want his club face in this position rather than the traditional toe up to the sky that is often recommended. And if we watch his impact, it starts to make sense. So coming through the ball, Kyle has the sense that if he sets his club closer to square sooner, he can keep his hands more stable and still hit the ball straight. So as he comes through, thanks to these moves that we just talked about, he delivers that club square, and we know that since he wasn't rolling it to square towards impact, or as he approached impact, we won't see it rolling over after impact. So we know that this means he has a very low rate of closure, and there's not as much timing needed to hit the ball with a square club face. And as long as he keeps rotating his body and his shoulders, he's going to get a ton of power and a club face that stays stable, so he's going to be able to harness that power, which explains why he is such a consistent ball striker. Long and accurate. So, while these moves themselves may seem a little intimidating at first, and of course they are pretty athletic and take some training and some practice, the philosophy itself is actually pretty simple. And that's if we can learn to set our club face in the right position prior to impact, and then move our body correctly, it's going to allow us to square that club face with body rotation, which is going to be a lot more repeatable and consistent than being forced to time it with excess hand action, whether flipping or rolling. So a lot of top ball strikers will use that philosophy, and it helps them to have a lower rate of closure through the ball, helps avoid that miss to the left that all great players hate, and really helps for consistency under pressure. So a great swing by Kyle Stanley, and we'll look for more success from him moving forward.